All right, guys, so in this video, we're going to talk about the properties of negatives, okay? We've got two values we're going to be using based on these properties. We've got A and B both, and I'm going to use the same values for A and B all the way through, okay? So A is going to be 3, and B is going to be 5, okay? So the first property here, we've got a -1 times whatever A may be, and again, we're going to call it 3. But basically what we're doing is we're multiplying -1 times A, or we're taking the opposite of A. Well, either way we do that, -1 times positive A is negative A. So if we plug in 3 for A, we've got -1 times 3, or you can think of it as the opposite of 3. Either way, that product is going to be -3, okay? If we've got a negative A here instead of a positive A, so we've got a -1 times a negative A, or we have the opposite of negative A. Either way, we're going to get a positive A, okay? So when I plug in 3 here, so I've got a negative times a -3, -1 times -3, or the opposite of -3. Either way, I get +3 as my product, okay? And property 3 here, we've got a -A times a positive B, okay? Again, whatever A may be, whatever B may be, okay? -A times positive B is the same thing as A times negative B, okay? And either way, it's going to be the negative product of A and B, okay? So let's plug in 3 for A and 5 for B. So -3 times +5, we know that's -15, okay? If I were to say, well, what about it's +3 times -5? Again, that product is the same. Think about the commutative property we learned about earlier, okay? So 3 times -5 is also going to be -15. Or I can think of it hey, that's going to be the negative product of those two values, 3 and 5. Well, 3 times 5 is 15, and then -1 times 15 would be -15. So you can see all of these products are the same, -15, even though they're all written differently, okay? So that property of negatives is going to be really important as we progress through the class, okay? In property 4, the opposite of A times the opposite of B. Well, we've got these two negative values here. We know a negative times a negative is a positive. So the opposite of A times the opposite of B is going to be AB, okay? Oh, so we all know that's going to be -15, excuse me. So -3 times -5, we know that's +15. We also know 3 times 5 is 15, okay? All right, let's look at number 5 here. It kind of looks like a distributive property problem, right? So if you wanted to use the distributive property here, that would make total sense. So the opposite of A plus B would be -A minus B. So let's plug in our values. So the opposite of 3 plus 5, notice 3 plus 5 is 8, and we're going to have the negative of that, so it's going to be -8. We could also kind of distribute that -1, and I'd get -3 minus 5, and we combine those, we get -8 as well. So notice that it doesn't matter how these are written, that answer will still be the same, okay? And 6 is just a variation of 5 here. We got the distributive property, or we could take the difference of A and B and get the opposite of that, okay? So again, let's plug in that. If I do the parentheses first here, 3 minus 5 is -2. The opposite of -2 is +2, okay? Or we could distribute -3 plus 5, okay? Or we could do 5 minus 3. So either way with those answers, we all get +2, okay? And those are the properties of negatives that we'll use going forward.